15 open-source AI repos broke out this week, and a few, like Emotion Ball, Vomit, Ray, you'll want on your radar. The newest launches, what Hacker News is arguing about, and the repos gaining stars fastest, all drawn out of the noise. Let's get into it.
Hey, welcome back to the Zakulo, where we draw the signal out of the noise in open source AI. This week, I went through the newest projects. What's blowing out on Hacker News are subfield spotlights and the fastest movers on GitHub. A few caught my eye: Emotion Ball, Vomit, Ray, and I'll flag what stood out as we get into it.
Let's start with the newest projects, repos that showed up this week. So this week, I want to talk about Emotion Ball by Sam70361, which has quietly pulled in around 252 stars. Now, the name is charmingly literal. It's a little JavaScript project that visualizes emotion as well, a ball. But don't let the simplicity fool you. What I find interesting here is that it's a great example of the small, teachable repo. There's no heavyweight framework, no build system nightmare, just clean JavaScript you can actually read and learn from. That makes it genuinely useful for folks getting into interactive UI, canvas animation, or state-driven visualizations without drowning in dependencies. Compared to the sprawling emotion detection ML libraries out there, this isn't trying to classify your face with a neural net. It's about representing feeling as motion and color, which is a design problem more than an AI one. If you teach front-end, or you want a weekend project to fork and remix, this is a nice starting point. As always, if you want the full breakdown and more repos like this each week, the newsletter link is in the description. Here's a problem anyone building agents has hit. You point a model at a web page, and suddenly you're burning 15,000 tokens on nav menus, cookie banners, and footer links just to grab one price or one paragraph. Only CLI's OC flips that. Instead of dumping raw HTML or a full DOM tree into your context, it turns a website into a compact command line interface, so your agent runs a few targeted commands and gets back hundreds of tokens of actual signal. What I like is the framing. Most scraping tools optimize for humans reading output. This optimizes for a model's context budget, which is where your real costs live. Compared to something like a headless Puppeteer setup or Playwright MCP, you're trading full-page fidelity for lean, structured interaction. A smart trade-off when tokens are the bottleneck. It's early, 241 stars, JavaScript, so expect rough edges. But if you're shipping agents that touch the web, this is worth a weekend look. If you want more finds like this before they blow up, the newsletter link's in the description. So here's something a little different from the usual code drop. This one's pure knowledge. Amit Shekhar's LLM Inference Engineering is a structured learning path for the part of the stack most tutorials skip entirely. Everyone teaches you how to train or fine-tune a model, but almost nobody explains what actually happens when that model has to serve thousands of requests at once. This repo walks you through it deliberately. KV cache, page detention, continuous batching, then connects those concepts to the tools you'll actually reach for, like VLLM and SGLang. What makes it useful is the sequencing. Instead of dumping you into VLLM's docs and hoping you infer the fundamentals, it builds the mental model first, so those docs finally make sense. It's aimed at backend and ML engineers moving into serving and cost optimization, where memory layout and throughput decide your GPU bill. At 200 plus stars, it's early, but roadmaps like this tend to grow into references people bookmark for years. If you like curated finds like this, the newsletter's linked in the description. Now, the ones the Hacker News crowd couldn't stop talking about. So this one's called Vomit, and I appreciate that the author didn't try to dress it up. The premise is dead simple. Point a smaller, cheaper model at the output of your expensive frontier model, and strip out all the padding. The certainly, let me help you with that. The restated question, the bulleted summary of what it just said. What's clever here is treating verbosity as a post-processing problem rather than a prompting one. You've probably spent hours engineering system prompts begging for terse answers. This offloads that entirely, and because it's written in Go, it slots neatly into a pipeline or a shell script without dragging a Python environment along with it. Who's it for? Anyone running high-volume inference, where token cost compounds, or folks piping model output into other tools that choke on prose. It won't fix hallucinations, and there's an obvious irony in spending tokens to save tokens, so measure before you commit. But as a lightweight cleanup layer, it's a genuinely pragmatic idea. If you want more finds like this weekly, the newsletter link's in the description. So, here's Codex, OpenAI's take on the terminal coding agent, and the detail that jumped out at me is that it's written in Rust. That's a deliberate choice. Most of the agent tooling we've covered lives in Python or TypeScript, which means slower cold starts and a heavier install footprint. A Rust binary drops into your path, starts instantly, and doesn't drag a runtime along with it. For a tool you're invoking dozens of times a day, that friction actually matters. Where this sits against Aider or Claude Code is interesting. It's leaning lightweight, no big TUI, no sprawling config, just an agent that reads your repo and acts. If you live in the terminal and you're allergic to editor lock-in, that's the pitch. The trade-off is you're trusting an early tool with shell access, so sandbox it and read the diffs before you accept them. Worth a weekend if you're already building agent workflows and want something that respects your terminal. If breakdowns like this are useful, the newsletter goes deeper every week. So this one caught my eye because it's deliberately tiny. Vivek Haldar's seed isn't trying to be a framework. It's a starting point, the minimum viable agent you can actually read top to bottom in one sitting. And I think that's the whole point. Most agent projects these days bury you in abstractions, tool registries, memory backends, planner executor loops you have to reverse engineer before you write a single line. Seed goes the other way. It gives you a loop, a way to call tools, and gets out of the way. Who's this for? Honestly, anyone who learns by building. If you've ever cloned a big agent repo and felt lost, this is the counterexample. A codebase small enough that you understand every decision, then extend it your way. Think of it less as competition to LangChain or AutoGPT, and more as the read the source tutorial those never quite gave you. If you like repos that teach as much as they ship, that's exactly what we dig up every week. Newsletter links in the description. Go grab it. This week's Spotlight zooms in on one corner of AI. Ray is one of those projects that quietly became infrastructure while everyone was looking at flashier things. At its heart, it's a distributed runtime. You take a normal Python function, slap a decorator on it, and suddenly it runs across a cluster without you rewriting your whole code base. That's the pitch, and honestly, it mostly delivers. Where it gets interesting is the library layer on top. Ray train, tune for hyperparameter search, serve for model deployment, and RL-lid if you're doing reinforcement learning. So instead of stitching together 5 different tools, you get a coherent stack that shares the same scheduling primitives underneath. Compared to something like Dask, Ray leans harder into ML workloads and actor-based patterns, and compared to Spark, it feels far more Python native and less batch-oriented. It's used by teams scaling training and inference who've outgrown a single machine but don't want Kubernetes-level ceremony everywhere. If you're hitting that scaling wall, it's worth a serious look. And if you want more finds like this each week, the newsletter link is down in the description. So GitLeaks does one job and does it cleanly. It scans your repos for secrets that shouldn't be there. API keys, tokens, private keys, all the stuff that quietly leaks into commit history and haunts you 6 months later. What I appreciate is that it works on your whole Git history, not just the current working tree, so it catches the credential you thought you deleted, but actually just committed over. Being written in Go means it's a single fast binary, easy to drop into CI or a pre-commit hook without dragging along a runtime. Compared to something like TruffleHog, GitLeaks leans on configurable regex rules and entropy checks, which makes it lightweight and predictable. Though TruffleHog goes further with live secret verification. Honestly, running both isn't a bad idea. This is for anyone shipping code, solo devs, security teams, folks auditing an inherited codebase before it becomes a problem. If you want more tools like this landing in your inbox each week, the newsletter link's in the description. All right, let's talk about LLM action, because the HTML project label really undersells what's going on here. This is essentially a massive community-vetted knowledge base for actually training and deploying large language models, the parts nobody puts in the flashy demos. We're talking distributed training strategies, fine-tuning approaches, inference optimization, quantization, the operational headaches you hit when a model leaves your laptop. What makes it stand out is the depth. Where a lot of awesome LLM lists just dump links, this one leans into structured explanation, closer to a living textbook than a bookmark folder. It's mostly Chinese language, so keep a translator handy, but the diagrams and technical structure carry a lot even if you don't read it fluently. Who's this for? Engineers moving from calling an API to genuinely understanding the stack underneath. If you've ever wondered why your fine-tune ran out of memory, or how tensor parallelism actually splits things up, start here. If you want more repos like this one surfaced every week, the newsletter link's in the description. Go grab it. These are the repos gaining stars the fastest right now. So this week, we've got DeepSeek Harness Desktop from Anywhere Labs. And I'll be honest, the description is thin, but the shape of it tells you a lot. It's a TypeScript desktop harness built specifically around DeepSeek models. And that word harness is the interesting part. This isn't another chat wrapper. A harness usually means tooling for structured runs, prompting, evals, comparing outputs across configs, packaged into something you can actually click and run on your machine, instead of wiring up in a notebook. Where this fits? If you're already using a Llama or LM Studio to poke at models, this is the more opinionated, DeepSeek-focused cousin. Narrower, but likely deeper for people iterating on real workflows. TypeScript end-to-end also means it's approachable if you live in web dev land and don't want to touch Python. 58 stars in a week on something this early usually signals a maintainer scratching a genuine itch. Worth cloning before it stabilizes into strong opinions. If you want the rest of this week's finds broken down, the newsletter link's in the description. So, this week, we've got awesome DSH plugin, and I want to be honest with you about what it is and isn't. This is a curated list, an awesome style index of plugins for DeepSeek Harness, or DSH. It's not a framework itself, it's the map that tells you what the ecosystem around DSH actually looks like. And that's genuinely useful when a tool is young. If you're already running DeepSeek models through the harness and you're tired of writing the same glue code twice, a good curated list saves you an afternoon of digging through search results and half-abandoned repos. 36 stars this week is modest, but for an ecosystem index, that's a signal. People are showing up and want to know what's out there. Who's it for? Developers already committed to the DSH workflow, not folks shopping for their first harness. Compared to just grepping GitHub, the value here is human judgment doing the filtering. If you like early-stage ecosystem finds like this, the newsletter link's in the description. All right, this one's going to spark some debate, and I think that's worth talking through honestly. Watermarks Remover does exactly what the name says. It strips AI provenance signals across a bunch of formats. We're talking invisible Unicode characters that models sneak into text, C2PA credentials baked into images, and metadata buried in PDFs, docx, SVG, all of it. Technically, it's a clean piece of engineering. Most tools handle one format. This one treats provenance as a cross-format hygiene problem, which is genuinely a smarter architecture. Now, the obvious tension. The whole point of C2PA is transparency about how content was made, and this undoes that. So who's it actually for? Legitimately folks scrubbing accidental metadata leaks, or researchers testing how robust these marks really are. And spoiler, most are trivially removable, which is the real lesson here. It's a reminder that provenance you can delete isn't provenance you can trust. Use your judgment on this one. If you want more repos that make you think, not just download, the newsletter link's in the description. And finally, the teams shipping the hardest this week. Okay, so Orca calls itself an ADE, an Agent Development Environment. And once you sit with that framing, it starts to make sense. Instead of babysitting one coding agent in a terminal, you're orchestrating a fleet of them in parallel. And crucially, you bring your own subscription. So you're not paying Orca a markup on top of whatever model access you already have. That's a meaningful distinction from a lot of the wrapper tools that quietly meter you. The desktop and mobile angle is the part I keep thinking about. Kicking off agent runs from your phone, checking on them like background jobs, that's a different mental model than the always at your desk loop most of us live in. If you're already juggling multiple Claude code or similar sessions, this is aimed squarely at you. 186 commits in a week tells me it's early and moving fast, so expect rough edges. Worth watching, not necessarily worth betting your workflow on yet. If you like this kind of breakdown, the newsletter goes deeper every week. Next up is DSH Web UI, plugin and skin collection for DeepSeek Harness, DSH Web UI. Taskboard, Git graph, right side panel, remote mobile UI, pet, live token stats, and skin center. It's written in TypeScript. What makes it worth a closer look is how it fits into the current wave of open source AI tooling. Projects like this are building the infrastructure layer that powers the next generation of AI applications, and they tend to compound value over time. This week, it's picked up 64 commits this week, which is what put it on our radar. If you build in this space, DSH Web UI is one to keep an eye on, the kind of project that's easy to miss in the noise, but tends to matter a few months out. We break down why in the newsletter, linked in the description. Next up is OpenCodex, universal provider proxy for OpenAI Codex and Claude Code. Use any LLM, Claude, Gemini, Grok, DeepSeek, Ollama, with Codex CLI, App, SDK, and Claude Code. It's written in TypeScript. What makes it worth a closer look is how it fits into the current wave of open source AI tooling. Projects like this are building the infrastructure layer that powers the next generation of AI applications, and they tend to compound value over time. This week, it's picked up 64 commits this week, which is what put it on our radar. If you build in this space, OpenCodex is one to keep an eye on, the kind of project that's easy to miss in the noise, but tends to matter a few months out. We break down why in the newsletter, linked in the description.